First of all, it's a pleasure to be here, and Dominic, thank you for the invitation, and most importantly, thank you for your leadership and your support. And Nicola, what a great addition. We're so fortunate to have him part of the leadership team, and he, as Dominic spoke, he just brings so much to the table, which is so helpful. I do want to share with you that you should know the 3 Canadian directors and myself at the International Executive Board. Quite frankly, we are a force. There's true leadership. There's true progressive leadership. And I'm so damn proud of the work we do on the International Executive Board, for sure. I am always impressed at the level of engagement that are at the assemblies. And I think if I understood it right, this year is more than even last year. We're closer to 500. So to me, that sends out a clear message to our union, to our members, our communities, to our governments, to our employers, that District 5 members are engaged in standing up for a better future for their members and their families. Thank you. Thank you. Merci for doing that. I don't want to repeat a whole lot of stuff that has been said, but I do want to double back on the bankruptcy legislation. It is truly a huge victory for working people, and specifically our union. I mean, we fought for decades to try to figure this out, and through the success we had about a year ago, we are now moved up on the creditors list to the point where if Cliffs went into bankruptcy now, our members' pension would not have been touched. And I got to tell you, it was members from across Canada, leaders from across Canada that make this happen. But I want to acknowledge that the hard work of District 5 members and people like Nicola, I'm telling you, that helped us get this over the finish line. Just wonderful work. Thank you for always supporting, never letting up, and the work you've done. Thank you. I want to speak a little bit about the federal anti-scab legislation and how important that is for our union, the labor movement, and quite frankly, workers everywhere. It is the small step. No, it's not. It's a giant step in leveling the playing field when we go to bargaining. That they cannot bring in scabs to prolong the strike and attempt to, starve our members out and make standing up for your job, standing up for your rights more difficult. And we've got to remember, you don't hear much about this, but we've got to remember that when employers are allowed to bring scabs across the picket line, it pits worker against worker, neighbor against neighbor, divides communities. And then there's the boss. We know the boss that makes that decision. 2 years later, he's gone. A year later, he or she is gone. And what is left behind is destruction and labor relations that will be affected and destroyed for generations to come. So this anti-scab legislation is a big deal. I do want to caution us somewhat that yes, it was tabled, and we've done a lot of work as steelworkers to make sure the legislation has been tabled. The Bloc and the NDP have helped us with that. But that's just it, it's tabled. Now the hard work begins. Now it's very important that we double down and we engage. Let me just give you one example where the mere fact it was tabled, I believe, has helped us. In District 3, we had 300 Rogers workers that went out on strike about a week ago. Sorry, they were locked out. They were locked out about a week ago. And Rogers is the company that said, if you let us merge with Shaw, We'll create jobs in Western Canada. We'll create jobs across Canada. And so here's our first experience with them. We go to the bargaining table, 300 steelworkers. They lock us out, and within 24 hours, they bring scabs across the picket line. Shame. Shame on them. But it was interesting, because as the legislation hit the table, so many reporters, I was very fortunate to be interviewed by many, and the first question a lot of them had is, well, why do we need that? Give us an example. And boy, was I able to provide them example. Just last week, a company the size of Rogers locked us out and scabbed it out. And I got to tell you, just with that legislation being introduced, with the media coverage we had on it, I can tell you as I stand here today, our members, 300 members, have a great collective agreement, and they're back to work at Rogers. As I said, the work is just beginning on a couple fronts, because we've got to understand the bill that's been tabled says that after it becomes passed or royal assent by the Parliament, 18 months later, it will become law. And we say, no way, too long. 18 months is way too long. It should be passed by the government within early next year and should become law by the middle of next year. So we must double down, rally our troops, double our efforts, and continue to pressure politicians to make sure this is not only passed, but it's passed in a timely fashion. The other thing I should note that under the part of the anti-scab legislation is there's a portion of it called maintenance of activities, and it's about essential services and what are the rules of engagement. And I can tell you right now, the devil's in the details. That's the part of the regulations that is so important for us. Because you can pass anti-scab, but if the maintenance of activities is weak, employers will find their way around it and still be scabbing out our jobs. So there's lots to work. We want to get it in committee, and there's lots of work for us to do as steelworkers and lobbyists to make sure that in committee the changes that we need to the maintenance and activities agreement is done. And then again, as I said, to follow up to make sure this legislation gets passed well before 18 months from now. Absolutely. You know, I got to mention, I think Dominic mentioned Poilievre and the Conservatives. Now, there's a leader that suggests he's for working people. I can tell you, just when the legislation dropped, he was cornered and said, "What do you think of the legislation?" His answer was, "I haven't really read it yet." I call bullshit. He's trying to avoid the truth that he's going to push back on it. He's going to find a way to slow it down. And if his party ever gets into government, they will toss it out the first thing they do. So never forget what the Conservatives are about. Because if Poilievre was really for working people, he would have stood up proud and said, we got to pass that legislation now, and we got to implement it immediately. Just on that note, next week I am going to Ottawa. We're going to be joined by activists and lobbyists from across Canada, steelworkers, and we're going to lobby on just that issue, as well as pharmacare and a few others. The theme, temporary foreign workers. Wow, what a great discussion today. And what a major problem. Something that we need to take a stand on and we need to help fix. Because I can tell you that from my understanding, my travels and reading and people I've spoke to, Canada is a very small economy. We have 40 million people. Our neighbors, 360 million people. You know, the world is global. You've got India, China, Russia, you know, big populations, huge economies. So it's so important we look after our economy because it's a small economy. And one way we look after our economy is by recognizing the stats and the figures. The stats are that over the next 6 to 10 years, we'll have probably 800,000 to 1 million people retire. Them are workers retiring. So, why do we need temporary foreign workers? What we need is workers to come to Canada and, as we've heard today, have a path to citizenship. They're an important part of our economy. They're going to grow Canada. We need it for the future. Businesses, government, stop jerking them around and do the right thing and make sure when they come over to help our economy that they have a path to citizenship. Absolutely. You know, because anytime there's a two-tier system, workers, we all lose. And what they're setting up with temporary foreign workers is a two-tier system. And that won't work. It'll undermine our union. It'll undermine our collective agreements. And the fact that if a temporary worker belongs to a steelworker or any collective agreement, they should have the rights and protections within that collective agreement. Absolutely. One of the most important thing, in my opinion, but I think it's shared by a lot of people, the thing that we must do is bargain good contracts is the most important work of our union. Let me repeat that. We need to bargain the best good contracts because that's what we do. That's the strength of our union, and we'll continue to do that. And when I say that, it's more than just wages and benefits. It's health and safety. It's working conditions. It's workers having a voice in their union. It's respect. It's all those things. So I'm just so damn proud to stand in front of you today and tell you that across Canada, steelworkers are standing up, pushing back, having strikes, demanding more. And I can't be more proud of them. We have bargained across Canada some of the best agreements we have seen in generations. And I just want to thank each of you for the role you've played in that, our leadership, and steelworkers, keep up the work. You know your value. You know what you're worth. Stand up, push back, fight, fight, fight. The other important piece of legislation I want to share with you is legislation that we have fought for decades now in terms of federal legislation. We know Quebec and Ontario have pay equity, but our federal employees don't. And in 2001, we were able to push the government into federal pay equity for our federal regulated institutions or locals. And I got to tell you, the legislation isn't perfect, but my God, this allows workers, this allows unions a place at the table to fight about the gender pay equity, the problem we have where women make 30, 40% less than a man, the problems with when we have First Nations or first-time Canadians, especially in women, that make a lot less. So I just want to make you aware of that pay equity legislation. There's some real deadlines coming up. So I know Martin is working with, we've just hired one of the best pay equity specialists in Canada, Jan Boring. And she's working with Martin and districts and all the districts to make sure that we don't miss any deadlines. There's appeals. There's a whole lot of work to be done. So if you're federally regulated or you have federally regulated locals or units or sections, please make sure you connect with Martin and who will connect with any support he needs out of my office, because this is very important legislation. This, for some people, will give them better increases than we've seen collective bargaining. That's how unjust the system is and where we're about to fix it. Gender pay equity is very important. I also want to mention, because I know in District 5, it's an issue, and it's an issue across Canada, our CWS program. I just want to acknowledge that we know that it needs some work. We know it needs to be modernized. We know it has to comply with pay equity. And I can tell you that we're doing just that. We have people from all 3 districts working together. Again, Martin's playing a big role in that for us, to try to figure out what the modernized CSW will look like. And again, I just want to share with you, we're working on it. Expect it, hopefully sooner than later. But out of the policy conference, and we've heard from you that we need to modernize it, and we're doing our best to get it done for you. I also want to share, just every 3 years, we get together at the National Policy Conference, very similar, and many of you have been there. Very similar to what you do here is to kind of set the policy, set the initiatives for the union. And I can tell you we had passed 68 resolutions at the last policy conference in April. I want to thank Dominic. Anybody that's been on the resolutions committee can know how challenging and time-consuming it can be. And Dominic chaired the resolutions committee, and we got 68 resolutions passed. So thank you. And, yeah, absolutely. And I can tell you just a range of resolutions from including international trade, industrial policy, the green economy, political action, international solidarity, health and safety, human rights, equality, education, and equity for women. So just a whole bunch of resolutions that are the CNO, the Canadian National Office, are now busy on, making sure that we can implement them in a timely fashion. We also recognize that the need to bargain climate and environmental language into our collective agreements, and we need to develop green industrial policy to ensure we maintain and create good union jobs, and we move to decarbonize our economy. Our legislation, such as Sustainable Jobs Act, we are working closely with the government on, but it's so important for us and for workers that we have a voice at the table. And we're really pushing that, because without our voice, workers will be left behind. And I don't believe there's a worker that doesn't want to go green for their children and grandchildren, have a better carbon footprint. But we can't do that at the cost of good jobs. So again, that takes our voice at the table, and I can tell you we are working hard on making sure that steelworkers' workers' voices are heard on the Sustainable Jobs Act Committee. I can also tell you that we're pushing buy clean procurement policies that require things to be bought, low-carbon products for materials and infrastructure. We know in this room, aluminum and steel made right here in Quebec is amongst the cleanest in the world. There is no need to import it. We need to procure it. We need to get it from Quebec and other places in Canada. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. So we're also committed, and Meg and Dominic, thanks for the kind words about Meg. Meg carries so much heavy water for our union. I can't thank her enough for the work she does. And I know one of her major files is on the trade stuff, fair trade, and I can just tell you, we are dogged at that constantly, where we're stopping dumping of products into Canada when it costs us Canadian jobs. So, Meg, thanks for your work on that, and thanks for all the work you do. So, in closing, we'll continue to demand a just and fair economy by fighting for anti-scab legislation, for better protections for 2SL LGBTQ+ workers, for long overdue pay equity, for good union jobs and a clean economy, and work towards reconciliation with our Indigenous peoples. The steelworkers, as steelworkers, working together is such a powerful tool. And working together will create fairness, security, and secure working conditions, and the strongest collective agreements. And if the truth be told, we have a lot. We have a whole lot to be proud of. We've accomplished so much, but yet there's still so much more work to do. So I'm looking forward to getting it done, shoulder to shoulder with all of you and your leadership and steelworkers across Canada and the labor movement. Merci. Thank you very much.